The sky over Seoul turned dark at noon. Massive ships blocked out the sun, casting shadows across the entire city. Han Sol stood on the roof of the military headquarters, watching the alien vessels descend. He had been a commander in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this moment. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Collective. They arrived without warning and without mercy. Their message was simple: surrender or die. Earth's governments had no choice. The aliens had weapons that could turn entire cities to ash in seconds. They had shields that made Earth's missiles useless. Within 3 days, every major city on the planet had fallen. Han Sol clenched his fists as he watched alien soldiers march through the streets below. The reptilian ones were called Vrexians. They stood over 7 feet tall with scales that shimmered like metal. The insect-like creatures were Kilax, moving in perfect formation like a single organism. Both species looked at humans the way humans might look at ants. The aliens wasted no time establishing control. They disbanded all military forces worldwide. Soldiers were ordered to return to their homes and forget their training. Anyone who resisted was fitted with a metal collar around their neck. These collars could deliver pain with the press of a button, or death if the aliens desired it. Han Sol had watched 3 of his fellow officers get collared for refusing orders. Their screams still echoed in his mind. Across the city, Yona sat in what used to be her laboratory. The aliens had converted it into a processing center where human scientists were forced to work. She was a quantum physicist, one of the best in her field. Now she spent her days translating human research for alien administrators who barely acknowledged her existence. A Vrexian overseer walked past her desk, his clawed feet clicking on the floor. He glanced at her work and made a sound that might have been laughter. "Primitive," he said in broken human language. "Your species plays with toys and calls it science." Yeona kept her eyes down and continued working. She had learned quickly that showing emotion was dangerous. The alien saw any display of pride or anger as a challenge. Better to be invisible, to be forgotten. But inside, her mind was racing. She was documenting everything she saw about their technology, memorizing every detail. She didn't know if the information would ever be useful, but she refused to stop being a scientist just because she was now a prisoner. In the mountains north of the city, Tae Wan and his unit had been hiding for 2 weeks. He was a captain in the Special Forces, trained for situations exactly like this. His team of 12 soldiers had escaped the initial roundup by abandoning their base before the aliens arrived. Now they lived in caves and moved only at night. "How long can we stay up here?" one of his soldiers asked. The young man's name was Min Soo, barely 23 years old. Tae Wan looked out at the valley below where alien patrols moved in regular patterns. "As long as it takes," he said. "We wait, we watch, we learn their habits, and when the time is right, we act." But privately, Tae Wan wondered if that time would ever come. The aliens seemed invincible. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's best weapons. What could a handful of soldiers with rifles possibly do against ships that could destroy cities? Down in the occupied city, Ji-Hai pushed a cleaning cart through the halls of the alien command center. She wore the gray uniform of a janitor, her head down, her movements slow and deliberate. No one looked at janitors. No one remembered their faces. It was perfect. 6 months ago, Ji-Hai had been a fighter pilot, one of the best in the Air Force. She had flown missions that would have terrified most people. Now she emptied trash cans and mopped floors. But she was learning things that no spy could have discovered. She saw how the aliens organized their command structure. She memorized which rooms held important equipment. She noted which guards were lazy and which ones were alert. Every night she returned to the small apartment she shared with 3 other humans and wrote down everything she had seen. She used a code she had learned years ago, hiding her notes inside cooking recipe books. She didn't know who would read them or when, but she kept writing. It was the only resistance she could offer. The months passed slowly. The aliens grew more comfortable with their conquest. They reduced their military presence in the cities, confident that humans had accepted their place. They began extracting Earth's resources, shipping minerals and materials to other worlds. They talked openly about their plans to transport millions of humans to labor colonies across the galaxy. Han Sol had been forced to take a job in a factory that produced components for alien ships. Every day he worked alongside former soldiers, engineers, and teachers. All of them broken, all of them defeated, or so it seemed. Late one night, Han Sol received a message on an old communication device he had hidden in his apartment. The message was simple. "The wolf sleeps but does not forget how to hunt." It was signed with a code he recognized from his military days. Taiwan was alive. The resistance was forming. Over the next few weeks, Han Sol made contact with others. He was careful, meeting people in random places, speaking in code, never using names. He discovered that thousands of former soldiers had gone into hiding like Taiwan. Pilots like Ji Hai were working inside alien facilities. Scientists like Yeon-ah were stealing information. The aliens thought humans were powerless because they had surrendered quickly. They didn't understand that sometimes the smart prey lies still until the predator looks away. They had studied human history, but missed the most important lesson. Humans were survivors. Every empire that had ever tried to conquer humanity had learned that peaceful humans were not the same as defeated humans. Sung Ho had been a Marine sergeant before the invasion. Now he ran what looked like a cultural center in the old part of the city, teaching traditional martial arts and history. The aliens permitted it, seeing it as harmless nostalgia. They didn't notice that the dance movements were actually combat training. They didn't realize that the history lessons included tactics from every major war humanity had ever fought. Young people came to Sung Ho's center thinking they would learn about their heritage. They left knowing how to kill with their bare hands, how to make explosives from common materials, and how to fight as a unit. Sung Ho was building an army in plain sight. Then, the announcement came. The collective declared that half of Earth's population would be transported off-world within 3 months. Families would be separated. Humans would be scattered across 1,000 different planets, ensuring they could never organize or resist again. That night, Han Sol received another message. This one was longer and came from multiple sources. Taiwan in the mountains, Ji Hai in the command center, Yeon-ah in the labs, Sung Ho in his training center, and dozens of others he didn't even know. The message was unanimous. The time for waiting was over. If they didn't act now, humanity would be broken forever. The aliens thought they had conquered Earth. They were about to learn that conquering a planet and defeating its people were two very different things. Han Sol stood on his apartment balcony and looked up at the alien ships hovering in the sky. Soon, he thought, very soon, those ships would burn. The resistance met in the basement of an abandoned restaurant. 20 people sat in the darkness, their faces barely visible by the light of a single candle. Han Sol recognized most of them from his military days. Commanders, pilots, intelligence officers, all of them supposedly broken and defeated. All of them ready to fight. Taiwan spoke first. His face was harder than Han Sol remembered, weathered by months in the mountains. "My unit has been watching the alien patrols for 6 months. They follow the same patterns every day. They're lazy because they think we're harmless. That's our advantage." A woman named Bo Ram stood next. She had worked in military intelligence before the invasion. "I've been monitoring their communications. They use a frequency we can intercept with modified civilian radios. They don't encrypt their local transmissions because they assume we're too primitive to understand their language. I've been learning it." Han Sol felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. These people hadn't given up. They had been preparing, learning, waiting for the right moment. Ji-Hai pulled out a stack of hand-drawn maps from her bag. These are the layouts of every alien facility in Seoul. Guard rotations, security systems, weak points. I've been documenting everything for 4 months. Yeon-Ah was the last to speak. She looked nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she opened her notebook. I found something in their technology. The aliens come from planets with different solar radiation than Earth. Their sensors have blind spots in our electromagnetic spectrum. I've been designing devices that could exploit these blind spots. If we can build them, we could create zones where their technology simply stops working. Sung-Ho leaned forward, his scarred hands clasped together. I have 300 trained fighters ready to move. They're not soldiers yet, but they know how to fight, and they're willing to die for this. Give me the word, and I can have them armed within hours. Hansol looked around the room. Each person here represented hundreds more across the city and around the world. The aliens had thought disbanding the military meant ending resistance. They didn't understand that warriors weren't created by uniforms and ranks. Warriors were made by will and purpose. We need a target, Hansol said. Something that will hurt them badly enough to prove we're not beaten. But we can't fail. One failed attack and they'll crack down so hard we'll never get another chance. The group debated for hours. Some wanted to target the resource extraction facilities. Others suggested hitting the alien soldiers directly. Bo-Ram proposed a raid on their communications center. Each plan had merit, but also risks. Finally, Tae-Wan spoke again. The garrison outside Busan. It's their main military depot for this region. If we can take it, we capture weapons, vehicles, and supplies. More importantly, we prove that humans can fight back. The plan was audacious and dangerous. The Busan garrison held over 200 alien soldiers and was protected by shield generators and automated defenses. But Yeon-Ah believed her electromagnetic devices could disable the shields. Ji-Hai confirmed that the garrison's security was focused outward, not expecting an attack from the surrounding area. And Tae-Wan's mountain fighters could approach from terrain the aliens considered impassable. They had 2 months until the forced deportations began. 2 months to prepare for an attack that would either save humanity or doom the resistance forever. Over the following weeks, the pace of preparation intensified. Yeon-Ah worked in secret, building her devices from scavenged parts and stolen alien components. She tested them in remote areas, careful to avoid alien patrols. The devices worked, but they were unstable. One miscalculation and they would explode rather than create the electromagnetic fields she needed. Sung-Ho expanded his training program, pushing his fighters harder than ever. They trained at night in abandoned buildings and empty warehouses. They learned to move silently, to communicate without words, to function as a unit. Many of them were young, barely 20 years old. But they had grown up under occupation. They had watched their parents submit to alien rule. They wanted to fight. Bo-Ram established a network of informants throughout the city. Janitors, factory workers, delivery drivers. Anyone who could move through the city without attracting attention became her eyes and ears. She gathered intelligence on alien movements, supply routes, and communication patterns. She discovered that the aliens were planning to start the deportations early, giving the resistance even less time. Ji-Hai volunteered for the most dangerous job. She would remain inside the alien command center until the attack began, feeding real-time information to the resistance. If she was discovered, the aliens would torture her for information before killing her. She accepted the risk without hesitation. Hansol coordinated everything, connecting the different cells while keeping them separate enough that if one was discovered, the others would survive. He used old military codes and dead drops, methods from before digital communication. The aliens monitored all electronic transmissions, but they didn't bother watching for physical messages left in random locations. Nari, a former naval officer, had been working in the alien vehicle depot. She had been studying their ships and transport craft, learning how they functioned. She discovered that while the aliens had advanced technology, they had never needed to make their systems foolproof. Their ships required specific biological signatures to operate, but those signatures could be faked with the right medical knowledge. She began working with a doctor to create false identification that would let humans operate alien vehicles. Dong-hyun had been an intelligence analyst before the invasion. He spent the occupation studying every recorded battle the Galactic Collective had ever fought, accessing their public databases that they maintained for historical pride. He found a pattern. The Collective always fought the same way. They relied on superior technology and overwhelming force. They had never faced an opponent who used guerrilla tactics or asymmetric warfare. They were psychologically unprepared for an enemy who didn't follow their rules of combat. 3 weeks before the planned attack, disaster nearly struck. One of Sung-ho's fighters was caught by an alien patrol while carrying weapons. The young man refused to talk, even under torture. He died without revealing anything, but the aliens increased their security across the city. Patrols doubled. Random searches became common. The resistance was forced to hide their weapons and pause their training. Han Sol feared the attack would have to be canceled. But Ji-hai sent a message through her network. The increased security was temporary. The aliens believed they had found an isolated incident, not an organized resistance. In fact, their arrogance was growing. They were angry that a single human had defied them and wanted to demonstrate their power before the deportations began. The resistance used the increased patrols to gather more intelligence. They noted which units were stretched thin by the expanded duties. They identified commanders who were overconfident and made mistakes. The aliens' response to one dead fighter gave the resistance more information than months of careful observation. 1 week before the attack, the resistance leaders met again. This time, there were 50 people in the room, representing cells from across the country. The movement had grown far beyond what Han Sol had imagined. There were fighters ready to move in every major city. Scientists had replicated Yeona's devices. Intelligence networks covered the entire peninsula. Tae-wan presented the final plan. His mountain forces would strike the Busan garrison at dawn, using Yeona's devices to disable the shields. At the same moment, Sung-ho's fighters would attack targets in Seoul, preventing reinforcements from being sent. Boram's information teams would jam alien communications, creating confusion. Nari's team would seize alien vehicles at the depot, giving the resistance mobility and firepower. It was ambitious. Many of them would die. But if they succeeded, they would prove that humanity could fight back. They would inspire others to resist. And they would capture enough alien technology to level the playing field for future battles. Han Sol looked at the faces around him. These people had been defeated 6 months ago. Now they were warriors again, ready to risk everything for a chance at freedom. Operation Wildfire begins in 7 days, he said. The aliens thought we were prey. Let's remind them that humans are predators too. The room erupted in quiet determination. No cheers, no celebrations, just grim acceptance of what was to come. They dispersed into the night, returning to their cover identities, janitors, factory workers, farmers. But soon they would be soldiers again. The countdown had begun. Dawn broke cold and gray over the mountains outside Busan. Tae-wan lay flat on the ridge, watching the alien garrison through binoculars. 200 meters below, Vrexian soldiers moved through their morning routines, confident and careless. They had no idea that 40 human fighters surrounded their position. Tae-wan checked his watch. 5 minutes until Yeon-ah activated the electromagnetic pulse devices. 5 minutes until everything changed. Beside him, Min-soo gripped his rifle with white knuckles. The young soldier had never been in real combat before. None of Taiwan's fighters had fought aliens, but they had trained for this moment every day for 6 months. They were as ready as they would ever be. "Remember," Taewon whispered to his team leaders. The shields go down first. Then we hit them hard and fast. Don't give them time to think or regroup. The moment they realize what's happening, they'll try to call for help. We need to take out their communications tower in the first 60 seconds. Around the garrison, other teams waited in position. Each one had a specific target: the vehicle depot, the weapons storage, the command center, the power generator. Success depended on perfect timing and overwhelming speed. Taewon's radio crackled. Yeon's voice came through, tense but controlled. Devices are active. Shields are down. You have 90 seconds before their backup systems kick in. All teams, move now! Taewon shouted into his radio, then leaped to his feet and started running down the slope. The first explosions tore through the garrison's communications tower. The structure collapsed in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Vrexian soldiers spun around in confusion, reaching for weapons that suddenly wouldn't activate. Their energy rifles required electronic targeting systems that had just gone dead. Taewon's team hit the front gate at full speed. The shields that should have stopped them were offline. The automated guns that should have cut them down were silent. For the first time since the invasion, humans faced aliens on equal terms. The Vrexians were bigger and stronger than humans. But Taewon's fighters had spent months preparing for this. They used their smaller size to move faster, ducking under the aliens' wild swings. They aimed for weak points in the Vrexian armor that Ji-hai had identified from her observations. Min-Soo fired his rifle at a Vrexian commander, hitting the alien in the throat, where the scales were thinner. The creature fell, gurgling and clawing at the wound. Min-Soo stared for a moment, shocked by what he had done. Then another alien charged at him and training took over. He rolled aside, came up firing, and didn't stop until the alien was down. Across the garrison, similar battles erupted. Humans with basic rifles and explosives against aliens with superior strength and armor. But the aliens' technology wasn't working, and their combat doctrine depended on that technology. They had never trained for close quarters fighting against an opponent who refused to retreat. At the same moment, across the country in Seoul, Sung-ho led his fighters in 12 simultaneous attacks. They hit patrol stations, supply depots, and communication centers. The aliens had been expecting peace. They got war. Sung-ho's team struck the alien patrol headquarters near the old city center. They moved through the building like ghosts, using every technique Sung-ho had taught them. Silent kills, quick movements, no hesitation. The Quilax guards never knew what hit them. The insect-like aliens had one major weakness that Dong-hyun had discovered. They relied on constant neural communication with each other. Disrupt that communication, and they became confused, unable to coordinate. Yeon's devices didn't just block alien technology. They also jammed the Quilax neural network. Sung-ho watched as a group of Quilax soldiers stumbled around, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Without their hive connection, they were just individuals, and confused individuals made easy targets. His fighters cut them down methodically. Inside the alien command center, Ji-hai had been mopping floors when the attacks began. She immediately dropped her cleaning cart and ran to the server room she had identified months ago. The door was locked, but she had stolen a key card weeks earlier. Inside, she found exactly what Bo-Ram needed: direct access to the aliens' planetary communication network. Ji-hai plugged in the device Bo-Ram had given her. It was a virus designed specifically for alien systems, using weaknesses Yeon-ah had discovered. The virus would spread through their network, corrupting data and creating false reports. It would make the aliens think attacks were happening in places they weren't, and that secure locations were under assault when they were actually safe. Alarms began blaring through the command center. Ji-hai could hear Vrexian soldiers running through the corridors above her. She finished uploading the virus, then destroyed the device and her keycard. She had maybe 2 minutes before someone thought to check the server room. She ran. Behind her, she heard the server room door explode open. A Vrexian soldier roared something in his language. Ji-Hai turned a corner and nearly ran into a Quilax guard. The alien raised its weapon, but the gun didn't fire. The electromagnetic pulse was still active. Ji-Hai didn't hesitate. She had kept a small ceramic knife hidden in her boot for months, waiting for this moment. She drove the blade into the Quilax's neck joint, right where the armor separated. The alien fell, twitching. She kept running, her heart pounding. She had completed her mission. Now she just had to escape alive. Back at the Busan garrison, Taewan's team had secured the vehicle depot. Nari had been right. The alien transport ships could be operated by humans if they knew which controls to press. His fighters were loading captured weapons and equipment into the ships, preparing to evacuate before alien reinforcements arrived. The battle had lasted exactly 47 minutes. Of the 200 alien soldiers at the garrison, less than 30 had survived. They were now prisoners, though Taewan didn't know what to do with them yet. His team had lost 11 fighters, 11 people who had been willing to die for this moment. Minsu was alive, covered in blood but uninjured. The young soldier looked different now. The fear in his eyes had been replaced with something harder. "Sir, we have incoming," one of the scouts reported. "Alien aircraft, 5 minutes out." "Time to go," Taewan ordered. His fighters piled into the captured ships. The controls were alien and strange, but Nari had trained pilots for this. The ships lifted off just as the first alien fighters appeared on the horizon. In Seoul, Sung-Ho's teams completed their attacks and melted back into the city. They had hit 8 targets successfully, destroyed 4 patrol stations, and killed dozens of alien soldiers. More importantly, they had proven that humans could fight back effectively. Boram watched the chaos unfold from her hidden command post. Her viral program was working perfectly. Alien communications across the entire planet were in disarray. They were receiving reports of attacks in hundreds of locations, most of them false. They had no idea where the real threats were or how organized the resistance had become. Hansol stood in the safe house, listening to reports flood in from across the country. Every attack had succeeded. The losses were heavy but acceptable, and the psychological impact on the aliens would be enormous. But he knew this was just the beginning. The aliens would respond with overwhelming force once they realized what had happened. The resistance had struck the first blow, but the war was far from over. Ji-Hai made it out of the command center by disguising herself as a civilian fleeing the chaos. She joined a crowd of panicking humans and aliens, then slipped away in the confusion. She reached the safe house 3 hours later, exhausted but alive. "It's done," she told Hansol. "Their communications are compromised. They can't trust any of their systems now." Hansol nodded. Around him, resistance leaders were already planning the next phase. They had captured alien weapons, vehicles, and technology. They had demonstrated that humans could fight effectively. And most importantly, they had given hope to millions of people who thought they were defeated forever. That night, every major news network on Earth, both human and alien-controlled, showed footage of the attacks. The Galactic Collective issued an immediate statement. The human rebellion would be crushed without mercy. Additional military forces would arrive within days. But for the first time in 6 months, humans went to sleep believing they had a chance. The aliens had thought humanity was powerless. They had just learned their first hard lesson. The second lesson would be even harder. In the mountains, Taewan and his fighters distributed the captured weapons to new recruits. Hundreds of people were arriving daily, ready to join the resistance. The aliens had created their own enemy by treating humans as helpless slaves. Hansol addressed the resistance through secure channels that night. His message was simple. "We've shown them we can fight. Now we show them we can win." The war for Earth had truly begun. The Galactic Collective's response was swift and brutal. Within 3 days, a battle fleet of 40 warships arrived in Earth's orbit. The Supreme Commander of the Rexian forces sent a message that played on every screen across the planet. Submit completely or entire cities would be destroyed as examples. Han Sol watched the message from the Resistance headquarters, now relocated to an underground bunker outside Seoul. Around him, the Leadership Council sat in grim silence. They had known this moment would come, but seeing 40 warships hovering above Earth made the reality terrifying. "We can't fight that," one of the council members said, his voice hollow. "We won a few battles against garrison forces. This is their entire military might." Dong-hyun stood up, his eyes sharp despite days without sleep. "That's exactly what they want us to think. I've been studying their military records for months. The collective fights every war the same way. They arrive with overwhelming force, make threats, and expect immediate surrender. But look at what happens when enemies don't surrender right away." He pulled up images on a screen showing previous collective campaigns. They have doctrine, strategy, established procedures. Everything follows a pattern. But humans don't fight by patterns. We adapt. We improvise. We do things that don't make sense by their logic, and that confuses them. Taewon leaned forward. "He's right. At the Busan garrison, the aliens panicked when their technology failed. They're trained to fight in specific ways. Take away their advantages and they don't know what to do." Yana added, "I've been analyzing the captured alien equipment. Their technology is incredible, but it's also fragile. They've never needed backup systems or redundancy because nothing has ever challenged them before. Every system depends on other systems. Break one part, and the whole thing fails." Han Sol felt the mood in the room shift. They were looking for hope, and his team was giving them reasons to believe. "What's our move?" "We make them fight our way," Dong-hyun said. "Not in space where they're strongest, but on the ground where we control the terrain. We force them to come down here, and then we make them pay for every meter they take." Over the next week, the Resistance prepared for the invasion they knew was coming. The aliens wouldn't just bombard Earth from orbit. They needed the planet intact for resources. They would send ground forces to crush the Resistance directly. Sung-ho trained new fighters around the clock. The initial attacks had inspired thousands to join. Young and old, men and women, anyone who could hold a weapon wanted to fight. Sung-ho organized them into small units, teaching them guerrilla tactics. They would never win in direct combat against alien soldiers, but they didn't need to. They just needed to make the cost of victory too high. Nari had become the Resistance's expert on captured alien technology. She taught other pilots how to fly the alien ships they had stolen. It wasn't easy. The controls were designed for different biology, and the ships responded to thoughts as much as physical inputs. But humans were adaptable. Within days, she had 30 pilots who could operate alien fighters, even if clumsily. Boram's intelligence network had expanded across the globe. She had contacts in every occupied city, feeding her information about alien movements and plans. She learned that the collective was preparing to land forces in 6 major locations simultaneously, planning to crush the resistance centers in one coordinated strike. "They're coming in 4 days," she told the council. 50,000 soldiers, supported by armored vehicles and air superiority. They plan to wipe us out completely. The council debated their options. Some argued for dispersing and hiding. Others wanted to evacuate the cities and fight from remote areas. But Han Sol had a different idea, one born from Dong-hyun's analysis of alien psychology. "We let them land," he said. "We make them think they're winning, and then we turn their own advantages against them." The plan was risky. The aliens would land their forces in what they thought were resistance strongholds. But the resistance would evacuate those areas beforehand, leaving behind traps and false intelligence. When the aliens secured the strongholds, they would believe they had won. They would consolidate their forces and prepare for occupation. That's when the real attack would come. Not at their landing zones, but at their support infrastructure, their supply lines, command ships, communication centers. The aliens would win the battle but lose the war. Yeona worked day and night preparing new versions of her electromagnetic weapons. These weren't just pulse devices anymore. She had weaponized Earth's own biology. Bacteria and viruses that humans had adapted to over millions of years would be devastating to alien immune systems that had never encountered them. It wasn't biological warfare in the traditional sense. It was planetary immune response. "The aliens have been here for months," Yeona explained. "They've been breathing our air, walking on our ground, but their medical technology has protected them. When we disable that technology with electromagnetic pulses, they become vulnerable to every microbe on Earth. Their bodies won't be able to handle it." The 4 days passed quickly. The resistance evacuated the 6 target cities under cover of night, leaving behind skeleton crews to maintain the appearance of occupation. They planted explosives, set traps, and prepared false intelligence for the aliens to find. When the alien forces landed, they encountered minimal resistance. The few humans they found fled quickly. Within hours, the aliens had secured all 6 cities. Their commanders reported complete success. The human resistance had been broken. That's exactly what Han Solo wanted them to think. That night, the resistance struck at 40 different locations, not the cities the aliens had just captured, but the supply depots, communication relays, and support facilities the collective had established across the planet. Small teams hit each target simultaneously, using captured alien weapons and Yeona's electromagnetic devices. The aliens had left these locations lightly defended, focusing their forces on the major targets. Now those lightly defended positions were burning. In orbit, Taiwan led a daring raid using the captured alien ships. The collective's fleet was spread out, confident in their superiority. They didn't expect attack from ships using their own identification codes. By the time they realized what was happening, Taiwan's pilots had already launched missiles at their command ship's communications array. The explosions lit up the night sky. Humans around the world looked up and saw alien ships burning. It was the first time anyone had successfully struck the orbital fleet. Nari piloted one of the stolen ships, her hands shaking as she pulled off impossible maneuvers. The alien vessels were faster than anything human-made, but they were also more complex. She used that against them, pushing her ship into flight patterns that the sophisticated alien systems struggled to compensate for. Behind her, 3 collective fighters tried to follow. 2 crashed into each other when their coordination systems became confused by her erratic movements. On the ground, Sung Ho's fighters were ambushing alien supply convoys. The collective had advanced sensors and weapons, but in the dense urban environments of Earth's cities, those advantages meant less. A human with a captured alien rifle and knowledge of the terrain was more dangerous than an alien with superior technology, but no understanding of the environment. The Quilax forces proved especially vulnerable. Their hive mind made them strong when connected, but Yeona's disruption devices turned that strength into weakness. Isolated Quilax became confused and panicked. Sung Ho's teams picked them off methodically. The Vrexians were harder to defeat. They were natural warriors, strong and aggressive even without technology. But Dong Hyun had studied their psychology. Vrexians valued honor and direct combat. They saw humans as prey, not equals. That pride made them predictable. Sung Ho's forces used tactics the Vrexians considered dishonorable. Ambushes, traps, feigned retreats. The aliens would chase what they thought were fleeing humans, only to run into prepared kill zones. Their honor made them brave, but also foolish. 3 days into the counter-offensive, the first reports of alien illness began appearing. Vrexian soldiers were collapsing with fever. Quilax were developing infections their medical technology couldn't treat. Yeona's biological warfare was working. Earth itself was fighting back. The collective's supreme commander realized too late that he had been outmaneuvered. His forces controlled 6 empty cities, while the real resistance was destroying his supply lines and killing his soldiers across the planet. His fleet was under constant harassment from captured ships flown by increasingly skilled human pilots, and now his troops were getting sick from something their medicine couldn't cure. He ordered a full retreat to regroup and plan a new strategy, but Han Solo wasn't going to give him that chance. "Push them now," Han Solo ordered. "Don't let them consolidate. Keep the pressure on every front." The resistance forces, now numbering in the tens of thousands, pressed their attacks. They hit the aliens at every opportunity, giving them no rest, no time to adapt. Humans died by the hundreds, but the aliens were dying by the thousands. On the 10th day of the collective's victory, their supreme commander requested a ceasefire to discuss terms. Han Solo refused. There would be no negotiations until every alien soldier left Earth. The tide had turned. The aliens still had superior technology and numbers, but they no longer had confidence. They had come to crush a primitive species and found themselves in a war they didn't know how to fight. Han Solo stood in the command center, watching reports flow in from around the world. They weren't winning yet, but they were no longer losing, and that was enough for now. "They thought we were prey," he said to the council. "Now they're learning that sometimes prey evolves into predators." The Galactic Collective's fleet hung in orbit, damaged and demoralized. Their ground forces had retreated to fortified positions, no longer attempting to advance. For 3 weeks, the war had been a stalemate. The aliens couldn't defeat the human resistance, but humanity couldn't drive them off the planet completely. Han Solo called a meeting of the entire resistance leadership. Over 500 people crowded into the underground command center, representing fighters from every continent. They had fought hard and lost many, but they had also proven something the galaxy thought impossible. Humans could stand against the collective. "We've been fighting defensively," Han Solo began. "We've been reacting to their moves, surviving their attacks, making them pay for every step forward. But that's not how we win this war. To truly defeat them, we need to do something they can't imagine. We need to take the fight to them." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Taiwan stood. "You mean attack their fleet? We have maybe 50 captured ships and pilots who barely know how to fly them. They have hundreds of warships." "Not their fleet," Han Solo said. "Their home territories. We use their own ships to travel to their worlds and show them what it means to face an enemy that won't give up. We make them afraid to attack any planet ever again." The silence that followed was profound. The idea was insane. It was also brilliant. Dong Hyun pulled up star maps on the screens. "I've been studying collective territory. They have dozens of worlds, but their military comes from only 3. The Vrexian home world, the Quilax colony clusters, and their main shipyard at the Kepler station. If we hit those locations, we cut their ability to wage war." Yon-Ah added, "We've reverse-engineered enough of their technology to make our own versions of their weapons. Not as powerful, but functional. And I've figured out how to make their jump drives work for us. We can reach their territory in weeks instead of years." Nari stepped forward. "I have 200 pilots trained now. Give me the ships and I'll get us there." Bo-Ram had intelligence on collective defenses. "Their home systems are heavily fortified against external attacks, but they're not prepared for internal threats. If we use captured ships with correct identification codes, we can get close before they realize what's happening." The plan took shape over the next month. The resistance would divide into 3 strike forces. One would hit the Vrexian homeworld, not to conquer it, but to destroy military production facilities. Another would target the Quilax colonies, disrupting their hive communication networks. The third would attack Kepler Station, the collective's main shipyard. Sung Ho would lead the Vrexian assault. His experience in close-quarters combat made him perfect for fighting on an alien world. Taiwan would take the Quilax mission, using the communication disruption techniques that had worked so well on Earth. Ji Hai, now promoted to commander, would lead the station attack. She had proven herself in the Seoul Command Center and understood alien systems better than anyone except Yeon-ah. Han Sol would remain on Earth, coordinating the overall operation and maintaining pressure on the collective forces still occupying parts of the planet. The aliens couldn't know that humanity's best warriors were about to leave the planet. They needed to believe Earth was still the main battlefield. The Resistance spent 6 weeks preparing. They captured more alien ships in daring raids. Yeon-ah's scientists built weapons using hybrid human-alien technology. Kyung-min, a logistics expert who had kept the Resistance supplied through months of fighting, organized supply lines that would stretch across light years. Training intensified. The fighters learned to operate in zero-gravity and hostile environments. They studied alien biology to identify weak points. They practiced tactics for fighting in locations where the terrain was completely unknown. Min-soo, who had fought at the Busan garrison, volunteered for the Vrexian assault team. He was different now, hardened by months of combat. Many of the Resistance fighters were like him, transformed from ordinary people into warriors by necessity and determination. Finally, the day came. 3 fleets of captured alien ships, each carrying 500 human fighters, prepared to leave Earth. It was a moment of strange emotion. They were leaving their planet, possibly forever, to fight a war in the stars. Han Sol addressed them through video link. The collective came to Earth thinking we were primitive and weak. They thought taking our planet would be easy. They learned the hard way that humans don't surrender, don't break, and don't forgive. Now we're taking that lesson to their homes. Show them what it means to face humanity at war. The ships jumped to faster-than-light travel. The journey to collective space took 3 weeks. During that time, the fighters prepared and planned. They knew many of them wouldn't return. But they also knew that if they succeeded, Earth would be free forever. Sung-ho's fleet arrived at the Vrexian homeworld first. It was a hot, arid planet with massive cities built from red stone. The defenses were extensive, but they were focused outward on preventing an invasion fleet. They weren't prepared for a small strike force that appeared in the middle of their traffic patterns using correct identification codes. "All teams launch," Sung-ho ordered. The assault ships dropped from the captured transports, streaking toward the surface. Vrexian defense systems finally recognized them as hostile, but by then it was too late. Half the teams had already landed. Sung-ho's target was the main weapons manufacturing complex outside the capital city. His team of 50 fighters hit the facility like a hammer. They used Yeon-ah's electromagnetic weapons to disable security, then planted explosives throughout the complex. The Vrexian guards were tough and fought ferociously, but humans had learned to fight Vrexians over months of warfare. They knew every weak point, every tactical mistake the proud warriors made. The facility exploded in a fireball visible from orbit. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition stores and fuel reserves ignited. It would take the Vrexians years to rebuild their production capacity. At the Quilax colonies, Taiwan's approach was different. The Quilax were spread across multiple asteroids and space stations, their hive consciousness connecting them across vast distances. Taiwan didn't need to fight them directly, he just needed to break their connection. His teams infiltrated the main communication nodes and planted Yeon-ah's disruption devices. When they activated simultaneously, the entire Quilax neural network collapsed. Billions of Quilax minds, suddenly isolated and alone for the first time in their lives, went into shock. It was a psychological blow the Quilax might never recover from. They would survive, but they would never forget the terror of being truly alone. Ji-Hai's assault on Kepler Station was the most dangerous. The station was heavily defended and housed over 50,000 aliens, including military forces. Her team of 200 fighters had to somehow take control of or destroy the galaxy's largest shipyard. They used a captured collective admiral's ship, complete with proper codes and authorization. The station let them dock without question. Then HFY's teams poured out, moving through the station with practiced efficiency. They had memorized the layout during the journey, studied similar stations through captured data, and planned for every contingency. The fighting was brutal. In the narrow corridors of the station, neither side had much advantage. It came down to will and determination. HFY led from the front, her team pushing toward the station's reactor core, while other teams secured the docking bays to prevent escape or reinforcement. They reached the core after 6 hours of continuous fighting. HFY set the charges herself, using enough explosive to ensure the station couldn't be saved. Then she and her surviving fighters fought their way back to their ships. The explosion, when it came, was visible from 3 star systems away. Kepler Station, the pride of the Galactic Collective's military, became an expanding cloud of debris. News of the attacks spread through collective space like wildfire. The invincible Galactic Collective had been struck in their home territories by the same primitive species they had tried to enslave. The psychological impact was enormous. Other species that the Collective had conquered began their own rebellions. If humans could fight back, why couldn't they? The Collective found itself facing uprisings across their empire. The Supreme Commander, his forces demoralized and his supply lines cut, finally sent an official surrender request. Not just a ceasefire, but complete withdrawal from Earth and recognition of humanity as an independent power. Han Solo, now officially representing Earth in galactic politics, accepted the surrender with one condition: the Collective would pay reparations for the damage they had caused, and they would never approach human space again without permission. The Collective agreed. They had no choice. Their military was shattered, their economy in chaos, and their empire crumbling. Humanity had done in 1 year what no other species had managed in centuries. They had defeated the Galactic Collective. The human strike forces returned to Earth as heroes. They had lost over half their fighters, including many of the Resistance's best warriors. But they had won. Earth was free. Sung-Ho retired to a small farm in the mountains, finally at peace after years of war. Min-Soo joined Earth's new Space Defense Force, applying the lessons he had learned. Taiwan became a trainer for the next generation of warriors, ensuring humanity would never be caught unprepared again. HFY led the exploration of nearby star systems, using captured alien technology improved by human innovation. Nari designed Earth's first human-built starships, incorporating the best of both technologies. Yona continued her research, pushing the boundaries of science and making discoveries that would eventually make humanity a major force in galactic technology. Boram established Earth's intelligence service, ensuring they would always know what threats existed in the galaxy. Han Solo became Earth's first ambassador to the galaxy. At the first meeting of the reformed Galactic Council, now stripped of its conquest-driven leadership, he delivered a message that would define humanity's place in the stars. "We didn't want this war. We didn't ask to be tested. But you came to our world thinking we were weak, that our lack of advanced technology made us inferior. You forgot that technology is just tools. Warriors are made by their spirit, their determination, and their refusal to accept defeat. Earth spent 10,000 years learning to survive against impossible odds. You gave us one more challenge to overcome. We're grateful for the lesson because it showed us we were ready for the galaxy. But make no mistake, if anyone threatens Earth again, they'll learn what you learned. Humanity doesn't forget, doesn't forgive, and never stops fighting. We offer peace to all who want it, but to those who would make us prey, remember that we evolved from prey into predators, and predators protect their territory." The galaxy heard the message. Earth's war had changed everything. Humanity was no longer unknown. They were respected, feared, and recognized as equals. The war was over, but humanity's story among the stars was just beginning.